All right, hello, this is Scott Shaw, and we are going to be reviewing Chapter 8 of the Thomas and Sosin text, looking at termination. So by termination, we're not talking necessarily anything more than just ending services. We want to make sure that we end well whenever possible. We'll also talk about handling dropouts. Sometimes people leave, not only counseling or coaching, but sometimes people leave the church, and a lot of times they have their own reasons. We'll also look at the skill of referral. So that's important to think about in terms of being able to send someone on their way, perhaps to get something where we don't have the expertise or the ability or the time even to serve them well in the current context of our ministry. So termination really is an intervention strategy in and of itself. Just like ending any relationship or the context of a relationship or changing a relationship. Sometimes there can be hard feelings, so being able to work that through in a way that feels good and leaves people well with a sense of integrity is important. We'll look at, how do we know when something has ended? There might be a formal termination to say, we're going to meet for 6 sessions, and then on the 5th session we say, this is our last time together. As we're getting ready, is there anything that you want to conclude with? We have our 6th session and then we go our way. But sometimes there's signals that something else has happened. Sometimes it can be difficult, so that's a piece as well to consider. Counseling and even coaching can be very emotionally intense. You're going to have people coming to you in a ministry context who are maybe premarital, and they're looking at, is this a relationship that's going to work? But on the other end of the spectrum, you may have couples who are struggling with various problems, from communication issues to anger, difficulties with kids, or disagreements on how do we discipline our kids, or even infidelity or possible separation and divorce. So the counseling and coaching relationship is one that is very intense at times. For the counselee, it might be a trigger for abandonment. If you're my pastor, you're my minister, I came to you to help me through this difficult time in my life, I feel like you're leaving me now that you want to end counseling. So it might trigger issues of abandonment. At the same time, they might become angry, so you might see that as displacement, where a counselee or a coachee might act angry towards you, and that you're suggesting that counseling needs to end or coaching needs to end. And also it might be fearful that, you've been a big help to me, I don't know what I would have done without you, and I'm not sure I can make it on my own. They may even ask, is it okay if I come back, or can we schedule more sessions together if it seems like I'm not able to make it on my own. In essence, that's probably a good thing that you've been helpful. At the same time, we don't want to create a dependence where people feel like they need us. If anything, we want to direct them back to the Lord, and our true dependence is on Christ, so we want to continually move people in that direction. For the counselor, it can be tough for us too. We've enjoyed success when you've helped people move from point A to point B and accomplish their goals, or at least get closer or work through a difficult time. Sometimes it's quite pleasant. Now there's those other times in counseling where maybe it hasn't been pleasant. I've always told my students that sometimes we have those favorite clients that, were it not a counseling relationship or a coaching relationship, we would be friends, and sometimes we are friends. At the same time, there's some that, boy, were it not part of our work and ministry, we probably wouldn't just normally hang out with these people. They're what I call difficult people, and usually it's something that's more about myself than about them in particular. If somebody's difficult, there's usually something that they trigger in myself that's bringing about a reaction. As well, loss of the encouragement and positive feedback received from counselee. So many of us go into ministry with the sense of we want to be helpful. We want to serve the Lord by serving other people well. And it's nice to hear that you're doing a good job sometimes. So some of the positive kudos that we get from counseling can be encouraging. And along with that, we might actually worry about them. If it's someone that we're working with who maybe is struggling with a difficult relationship or a marital breakup, or even perhaps kids who are in trouble with the law or struggling or getting into behaviors that could be problematic for them, we might have that sense of, boy, I hate to cut a tie here. I want to stay in touch, and I'm worried about how they're doing. And that's one of those things that it's helpful to turn over to the Lord. Might be insecure about his or her effectiveness as well, and have I really done all that I can do? So again, termination is an intervention strategy in and of itself. It's not always easy. It's not like we can get to the end of a session and look at our watch and say, oh, meter's up, have a good week. But sometimes it does take tact and finesse more often than not. Formal termination sometimes signals that something has ended, and that's why in a formal counseling process, we'd have informed consent, and we would say that really to get from point A to point B, this is what it's going to look like, and this is where we're going to go, and this is how we'll know when we've achieved success. We do a similar thing in counseling and coaching, where how will we know, or how will you know when you've accomplished this goal, or when this situation has resolved itself? And really, I like to think that termination itself of this context around which we're serving a client or a counselee or a coachee is, in essence, started from the very first time we meet with them in that formal relationship. So again, maybe there's someone who attends your congregation or ministry, or that you've known even before you engaged in a counseling or coaching relationship. However, when you engage in a counseling or coaching relationship, you're specifically putting a set of parameters around it so that you're already beginning with the end in mind. It's also a means of maintaining therapeutic changes, so you've covered some of those in the first 3 modules of this course, and looking at goal planning and some of the skills that you use in counseling. We do the same thing as we think about termination, and that we use in coaching also. And it reminds both everyone involved in the process, counselor and counselee alike, or client, or if you're working with families or groups, the same thing, that it's just a reminder that growth has happened. And also celebrate what God has done. So it's also important to give thanks. Sometimes the counselee initiates closure. Maybe it's happened abruptly, or we're thinking, boy, there's still a lot here. It could be maybe a couple that you're working with and doing premarital counseling, and perhaps you're starting to see some red flags that, boy, we need to unpack some things, and I'm not sure this is really God's best for your life right now, and all of a sudden they never come back, and they're not willing to talk further, and they go off and do their own thing. That happens. Really, about a third to sometimes more than half of counseling ends abruptly, so it's important to look at what might be happening. Premature termination, also called unilateral, or just discontinuing, or attrition, or even dropouts, involves the counselee leaving before their goals have been achieved. Other issues, problem improvement. So, maybe things have worked, or things that happened in a previous session brought about remarkable change. So I think it's a misnomer that sometimes we kind of get it in the back of our mind that, it's a long problem, it took a while to get here, it's going to take a long while to dig ourselves out of this hole. And sometimes that's true. Long-standing problems, especially trauma, takes a while to work through. And yet sometimes things happen very quickly, and situations change, people change, and sometimes the Holy Spirit moves in such a way that things happen quickly, and that's okay. Sometimes it's dissatisfaction with counseling itself. I was hoping for one thing, and this is what I received, therefore I'm just not going to come back. And sometimes it's a personality trait or something that is internal with the person that we're counseling that there's not too much we can do to work through ahead of time. There might be environmental obstacles. If you're working in a ministry context, then sometimes people may have that as something that's difficult for them to work through. I really, if I could afford it, I would get a professional counselor or someone not involved with my ministry or church, because I'm, potentially telling you things that are very deeply personal, and I know you're going to be speaking, preaching from the pulpit, counseling, talking to other people, and even though I know I can trust you, part of me is just not comfortable sharing these types of things with someone that your kids know my kids, are, I know your family, you know my family, and I really would like someone more objective. Research also shows that counselors who terminate prematurely, there's a higher correlation with depressive symptoms. So that might be something that as well, when we talk about referral, could be a good reason to get someone involved as well. A professional counselor, someone who has a little bit higher level of training or objectivity in a certain area. And as well, there's oftentimes fewer sessions. So it's not as common if you're 5-6 sessions in. And really, for most ministry-based pastoral counseling, you're probably not going to do more than 6 sessions on average. But if they meet once and then drop out, or twice and drop out, that might also be something that could be mental health related. Sometimes the counselee's expectations for the duration might be less as well. A lot of times when I do premarital counseling, I most often do 6 sessions, and I've had some couples that I've talked to and they said, well, okay, let me think about it, or we'll talk about it and pray about it, and then they talk to someone else that does premarital counseling and they do 3, maybe 4. They say, yeah, we're going to go and do our premarital counseling with this other person. Okay, it's not better, it's not worse, it's just different, and everyone's a little bit different that way. So perhaps, as someone comes in to talk to you about an issue, it might be that what you've shared with them is something different from what they expected, and they choose not to return. Covert, and that's probably fairly common. Nothing's spoken, they just don't show up again. So that happens in the clinical counseling realm. When I did private practice and worked as a family therapist, a child therapist, sometimes they just no called, no showed. I was there waiting for the appointment and never heard from them again. They just kind of dropped off the face of the earth. And sometimes that'll happen, hopefully not as much in a ministry context, especially if you're in church together, but sometimes that happens as well, where people will church hop and something happens, we're not sure what, but they just go to a different church, you don't hear from them again, and even when you follow up, they may not return your calls. They might not be as committed to the process itself of counseling. When you start getting into something, there might be maybe some issues or some emotional feelings that as they start to tell their story, it's like, I'm not sure I'm ready to go there yet. Passive-aggressive approach, it could just be, you know what, I'm not going to come back, so instead of calling or emailing or texting and saying, I can't make it tonight, they just let you drive in and sit there and wait for them. Certainly it's appropriate to contact them and ask if it'd be all right to reschedule, or if they're going to keep the appointment if that happens. Another form of premature termination is called doorknobbing, and it really happens at the end of the session. You've talked to them for maybe half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, however long you've predetermined that you're going to meet with someone, and right at the end, as you're getting ready to close up, they say, oh, by the way, I should have mentioned this, but and they'll give some kind of bombshell type thing where you think, wow, that should have been the focus of our session, and yet we've not really wasted a lot of time, but we've not spent the time as productively as we could had I known this thing that you were going to kind of drop on me right at the end of the session. That really falls under session management. Professional counselors, psychologists, and people in ministry alike have oftentimes things they have to do. You're going to integrate, more likely than not, counseling into the total package of what you do in ministry. So you're probably teaching, possibly preaching, you're visiting, you're responding to emergencies, but you're also doing some counseling as well. And when you budget that time in your week to say, this is time that I have for my counseling, and I really have to go. Maybe I have something with my family, I have an event for my kids, I have a hospital visit, I have to prepare for teaching or preaching. It's like, boy, I just spent the time that I had allotted for you, and now you kind of drop this on me. So it does feel like an ambush sometimes. It's important not to extend the session. So if you said, I have this time, I'm going to be meeting with you from 3 to 4 o'clock, and then I really have to go to my kid's soccer game, and that's what you were planning, it's really not fair to your family. It's not a good boundary. One of the assignments we'll get to is boundaries, but don't extend the session. It's important that, if you were set up to go to your kid's soccer game, really your kids are your ministry as well. Your family is your ministry, and we don't want to get burned out doing the work of helping. So a great response that Thomas and Sosin give: I'm sorry that you didn't tell me sooner, because I think it's important that we discuss this. I'd like you to come back one more time. Please take a couple of days to think about it. If you do decide to come in, call me and confirm your appointment. I'll hold your time open until. And then you set it up again as another session where you can budget it on your terms, and you're not feeling like, oh man, I just spent an hour, I'm going to be here 2 hours, 3 hours, and all of a sudden now it's a crisis that you have to adjust your schedule. So how do we avoid premature termination? They give kind of the idea of dropout. Avoid delays in seeing counselees, process reasons for termination, offer orientation, and again, we call that informed consent. So what are we here for? What are we going to do? We do that as well in coaching. And the coaching book, Coaching-Based Ministry by McGurvey and Cosby, there's really some good things in here on how do we do that? How do we orient to begin well in the coaching process? And it's a very similar process to counseling, where you're going to use that and say, here's what we're about. You don't want to process the counselee through many channels, so we keep it focused on, what's the most important thing. If there's a goal that they want to work on or a series of goals, you triage and say, what's the most important today? What are we going to cover today? And to work through that process. Order or contract the minimum sessions. So, we're going to meet together, and let's agree that we're going to meet at least for 4 sessions. We can reevaluate then, and if it looks like we need to extend, we will. But we're going to meet for 4 sessions, and I'm usually pretty firm with that. Be uncommon and going the extra mile. So we're in ministry for a reason. We want to serve the Lord by serving people well, and part of doing that is we do what we can, and we meet people where we're at. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to neglect our families or our own responsibilities in ministry. If part of my role in my ministry is pulpit ministry, it's important I do that well and with integrity. So I can't be doing so much counseling and so much coaching that I'm ill-prepared and I get up to the pulpit and it really shows that I haven't done my homework and prepared. So we do want to go the extra mile, but we don't want to go to the point where things get out of balance. Also using triggers to motivate counselees to attend. So if we see counselees at church on Sunday, and we're going to see them on Monday or Tuesday or during the week for a counseling or a coaching appointment, hey, it's great to see you today. I look forward to seeing you Monday. Oh, and it's kind of that jog in the memory. It's a trigger that, okay, yeah, that's right, we have our appointment tomorrow. So sometimes people get busy as well, like those in ministry, and they just simply forget about an appointment. So whatever triggers we can do, we want to do that. Also, when we get into stages of change, consider the counselee's stage of change. Where are they? Are they pre-contemplative, contemplative? Are they in preparation? Are they ready for action? So all of those things are going to help us to avoid premature termination. Counselor initiated. Sometimes we're going to limit it if we feel like, it's just we're not making progress. It's not easy, but sometimes we have to do that. I worked for a while in a church-based counseling program. I was the family life pastor type person of the church, so was actually working with a youth pastor who had come in and was not affiliated with the church that I was working for at the time. However, he had been coming in because he was trying to work on his marriage after engaging in an extramarital affair. And I was meeting with him and his wife. She was clearly devastated by his affair, her husband's affair, but it really didn't seem like he had a lot of guilt, a lot of contrition. He said he wanted to work on the marriage, but he hadn't really broken it off with the other lady. So essentially what I ended up doing was terminating services. And I said, I'm happy to meet with the wife and work on where do you go from here, but I'm really not open to meeting with him until he breaks it off with the girl that he had been having the affair with. And it turned out that he really was not at a point where he was willing and ready to make changes. So for me to continue meeting and kind of spinning our wheels and floating like a buoy, not really moving anywhere, was not fair to him, but it also wasn't fair to the wife that was clearly devastated by the end of her marriage, and things did end quickly thereafter. So sometimes they don't make goals. The best thing we can do is just stop. Contracted termination, I said we were going to meet for 4 sessions or 6 sessions. We have our 6 sessions, and we have closure, and that's a good thing. Forced termination, sometimes things happen, things change. We were going to meet for 6 sessions, 4 sessions, 10 sessions, whatever it is that you determine, and God calls you to a new ministry or change church, or something happens where they're no longer, they get a job change. We were going to continue meeting, but boy, you're moving out of town, moving out of state. Well, all right, then I guess we're done. So counselee's inability to maintain services, that's one. And sometimes, they're being uncooperative with the helping initiative. Might be where you decide that, what, this is just not going anywhere, and I think we're done here. No progress is also stalled termination. You might need to end it. Goal-based is a lot like graduation. So here we are, and the end. So termination and readiness. When we get to that point, how do you know when to quit? It's a great question. Is the presenting problem under control? It may be or maybe not. Has the counselee reduced the initial level of distress by developing better skills? So maybe we're not going to get them from, if 10 is best day of my life and 1 is where are you, Lord, worst day of my life. Maybe we won't get them to a 10, but if we can get them to a 2 or 3, to a 4 or 5, that might be progress that, given the time that we have to devote to it and the skills, that might be what we're ready to do. On the flip side, have they achieved greater self-awareness, better relationships? Are life and work more enjoyable? Does the counselee now feel capable of living with the helping relationship? That might be something that, as you think about it, it moves to that next step. Referral. Really, a referral might be always appropriate at some point. It really depends on your level of comfort and the level of comfort of the counselee or the coachee. And at that point, is there something going on that's beyond my level of comfort or my skill level? It also involves transitioning the counselee to another resource that's equipped to help. So I encourage people in ministry, counselors, coaches, know what else is available in your area. And I say the same thing to professional counselors in training. When I've taught professional counselors in their grad programs or master level social workers, there's always going to be something that you're not able, ready, prepared, trained, certified to handle. And we need to know what else is out there, so when the time is right, we make an appropriate referral. The same is true in ministry. And despite our best attempts, we cannot be all things to all people. So as much as we try and realize that sometimes the best possible thing I can do for someone is to get them competent care and service when I'm either limited in my time, in my efforts, in my training, and it's the best thing I can do. And to who do we make a referral? Social agencies. Again, know what's available in your organization, in your area, in your city, maybe even your county. Be aware of other parachurch organizations that can help. 12-step groups if there's addiction issues. It's important to know not only your local Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. There are Christian-based programs as well. Many larger churches actually run 12-step programs out of their congregations as part of their ministry. But even other anonymous type groups. It might be Gambling Anonymous or Al-Anon or Alateen, or even Sexaholics Anonymous. There's different anonymous groups that, if you've checked it out and vetted it, that it complies with a biblical worldview, then that might be something you'd want to refer someone to. Financial services. We know that a lot of times couples get into trouble financially, and that's a cause of marital stress, and even one of the top 3 causes of divorce. So knowing what kinds of financial services are available for counseling or coaching. Legal services, that can be important. And also a full range of mental health services is important to know. So know the referral services, create an expectation that referrals are possible, and that's something that I often communicate with clients quite readily. If there's something that's beyond what we're able to handle, or the time that we have, or my level of expertise, then I'm very happy to refer someone. Foster a full rationale of why a referral is needed. So it's not that I'm abandoning you or I don't like you or what you're telling me is not important, but sometimes it's just connecting someone with the best possible resource for them. Encourage them to follow through and also determine their response to the referral. So it's appropriate to follow up. And did you make the call, or can I make the call? Do I have permission to give your name? Can we do that together even while you're here with me? Is that all right? So that can be something that can help as well. The degree of preparation and the duration of counseling, Thomas and Sosin give the example of kind of a graph that you could have a scatter plot that when one increases, the other increases as well. And the termination acrostic they use as well. Talk about termination early. I encourage from the first session, when someone comes in for counseling or coaching, how will we know when we've achieved our goal? And that's a question that you can ask right in the beginning. And that way you have some kind of an idea of what success looks like. Otherwise, we're moving towards a target that we're not really sure looks like. Evaluate progress according to the established plan. Consider the counselee's separation reactions. Moderate or reduce the frequency of sessions. So it might not be cold turkey. We'll meet once a week for 4 weeks. Maybe we'll meet once a week for 2 weeks and then every other week for a couple sessions. Still 4 sessions, but we move those sessions further apart as we go. Moderate or reduce the frequency. It might be that we don't really have to meet as often as we thought. Invite them, share the feelings about termination. Notice and name your own feelings about termination. That can be appropriate. I feel like we've really had some good success. It's been really a privilege to get to know you better than I knew you previously by coming in, and I'm really glad that you're doing well, and this has been a positive experience for me. Active listening, reflective statements, you've spent some time on that already. Review the major themes, changes, critical moments, be intentional in affirming changes. Openly acknowledge any unresolved issues and navigate and note any ethical issues. And those are important things to consider also.